All right, welcome back, everybody. We're live. This is the Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. He's the famous author of Marketing to Mind States, the practical guide to applying behavior design to research and marketing. And as I like to say, it's just a nice way to use science to connect with your clients. Will, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Steve?
Excellent. So you had me on a little show the other day. We had a great conversation, and it spawned an idea for this. Tell us a little bit about what you want to talk about today.
That's right. So finally, I had you come in to step into my world of a lot of researchers, and you did great, and we had a great conversation. And what was interesting about that conversation is right after we finished, I was running in my own workshop. So I was back and forth, Steve. It was crazy. Going back and forth to different platforms. And two things happened yesterday. One was that I went back to my workshop. And what I do in these workshops every month is the back part of my workshop is when I actually look at other people's creative. And we go through the creative review process, and I show them how to look at their advertising through the lens of a mind state. And it's usually one of the kind of funner moments of the workshops. People really get into the nuts and bolts and the potatoes and of their marketing. And what happened was we actually had two people wanted me to speak specifically to an image in their marketing. And I did. I talked to images and talked about how those relate to mind states. And then I got off my workshop and I was looking through emails, and I actually had feedback from I have a guy who's helping me out looking at the new book cover of my upcoming book. In the future, this will no longer be the cover of the book. I'm doing a revised edition of the book in the next couple of weeks, and there's a new book cover. And the book cover is the idea is on the book cover is to have an orchestra or a maestro, like a maestro, right? And the idea being that, the idea of subconscious marketing, things like that, it's kind of having control over things to make a better outcome. And so that was an association I was trying to use. And he came back and he said, well, that's really hard on stock photography. So in one day to find that. And so in one day I thought, you know what? Like, I've had three major things happen to me today about the identification of the right stock photography. And so it just dawned on me that there are actually behavioral psychological principles if you're going to select the right stock photography. So for a lot of people out there, know that stock photography is a main staple of marketing. It's just, we can't all afford to do photo shoots and everything else. And so I thought, you know what? These two business owners were talking to me about their stock photography. And I'm looking at stock photography, and I started thinking to myself, how can we use mind states to select the best stock photography to actually get a conversion? So that's what I figured I'd talk about today.
It's one of the hardest things when you're working, and, we help our clients get their act together online, and it includes a website. That's one of the important pieces of a bigger system. But when we go through, we nail the messaging, the text, right? Mm-hmm. But it has to be complemented and supported with not only the font, the colors, but images. And most web designers online brochures, whatever, they quickly grab a photo from the stock photography, and everybody can tell it's stock photography. Yeah. But I'm telling you, it's one of the hardest things to do is find the right photography to complement the text. But even harder is how to find the right photography that helps you support your behavioral psychology intent of that asset that you're creating.
That's right. And I'm going to give you some tips during this session on things you can look for. But in the end of the day, you're right. It's really difficult. And I think what makes it somewhat difficult is that we have subjective opinions on what type of, stock photo I should have versus an objective opinion based upon behavioral science. So I think sometimes the hardest part is when, you're looking for people in an agency. and you'll get 300 pictures of people in some sort of an agency environment or whatever, and you're looking at them, and then you may have 4 or 5, maybe 10 that you really like. And now you're like, well, now what do I do? Which one's best? And we just go, well, I kind of like her. I like the lead model in that one, or this one just seems brighter. And it's all subjective opinion. And behavioral science can give you some clues on how to take that list of 10 and bring it down to something much more manageable. And it comes with this idea around semantic networks, basically, and this idea of being able to create these associations that you're looking for. So when somebody looks at that image, regardless of whether they read any copy, they can now be have that copy associated. I'm sorry, that visual image associated with a feeling, and that feeling is now associated with your brand.
Yeah. So what you're telling us is that these seemingly insignificant choices can have a big impact. And we make decisions based on emotions and justify later with logical thoughts or justifications. But little do we know that these photos, this atmosphere that you're creating on this asset, this, be it digital or hard copy, can really impact that decision process. No?
That's very, very true. And a little bit on the science behind it. I'm going to run a little experiment on you here, Steve, just so you get a feel for why there is some thoughtfulness that you should be thinking about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about semantic networks. And so it's a concept that's just about, associations that are in your head. So when I say the word Apple, like let's think about Apple, the company, what words kind of come to mind?
Well, Mac, iPhone, apps.
How about what do they stand for in your mind?
Well, they stand for a particular lifestyle brand.
Yep.
You identify being tech astute.
Yep.
By utilizing these things. It's interesting that even older people can feel modern by utilizing the Apple products.
So I like that. So you've brought in the things like, the functional things that they sell. You brought in technology. You brought in image. You brought in innovation. So those things are these nodes that are in your head. You have these associations with the brand Apple. And we all have associations with everything out there. I mean, everything. What the mind does over the course of many, many, many decades is whenever you experience something, it kind of figures out how things interrelate. So when I say the word Apple, a lot of people will say, well, Steve Jobs, iPhone, innovation, design, like these terms come up again and again and again. And that forms an association. So when somebody says Apple, these feelings, these desires come up. And why that's important is because those desires, those feelings, those associations are also important for you to know, because you are trying to create associations with your brand as well. So I got another thing. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna see how this kind of plays out. I'm gonna list out 4 or 5 words, and all I want you to do is, after I say those 4 or 5 words, tell me what comes into your head. Okay.
Okay.
So Roy G. Biv, color, sun, rain, sky.
An artist.
It didn't work as much as I thought it was. I'm going to do it one more time.
Remember, you're working with this is a low level aptitude person.
Okay, let me think. I'm going to try another set of words. I'm going to try Roy G. Biv again. Roy G. Biv.
I don't know. Sky. Who that is. Sky.
Connection. Color.
Roy G. Biv. Ride.
Connection. Sky.
Sky.
And color. There's no right or wrong answer.
Museum.
That doesn't fit with what I'm trying to get you to do.
I don't know, man.
Well, I'm gonna hope somebody out there got rainbow popped up in their head. Do you remember the old Roy G. Biv? Do you remember that from grade school? That's how you knew what are the colors, the main colors. Roy G. Biv knows the colors of the rainbow, right? That's why I threw that in there.
Okay.
Well, the idea there is that there are associations with sky, color, sun, clouds, Roy G. Biv. And then if these things come together, in your mind comes rainbow. Same idea that I want you to start thinking about stock photography is that there are associations in your stock photography that if you're thinking about what do I want to stand for, rather than looking for a subjective, I want to have a pretty girl in an office, right? Very subjective. Think about the associations that you want to create. And just so happens, I know the 9 associations that I think you should be creating because they're in my book, Marketing to Mind States. They're the 9 motivations. If all of our behaviors are driven or they're fueled by motivations, then those motivations, I believe, are really critical to identify the one motivation that you want to be associated with, and then design or find stock photography that is associated with that motivation so that when they see that stock photography, they feel that desire. And if they feel that desire and associate you with that desire, that helps build your brand and it creates you a brand that is associated with their internal desires.
I love that. So you have on here, let's show the FRMI.
Yeah.
Brain images to trigger analytical. What in the world is FRMI?
Functional resonant. Functional. I can't believe I don't remember. Image resonance. Functional resonance imagery. What's the M stand for? I can't believe it. I haven't done FRMI in so long.
Mental.
You look that up before I go. You look that up for me. I can't believe functional resonance. Anyways, resolution. I think it is. Before we get there, it's important for us to think about 2 types of conversion. So there are 2 types of conversions. And that's why you're really using stock photography or any kind of marketing. You want to convert something, right? And there are 2 types of conversion. One conversion is called more rational. And those are people who kind of in that moment need, I think you've even talked a lot about it, they need to feel as if they are confirming an emotional desire. And so those people in those moments need rational confirmation. And then there's another group of people, more emotional, or decisions that are more emotional. In that case, they need more emotional. And so we just don't talk about this because you and I are so focused on the emotions. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes in some categories for some decisions, you need to be leaning more rational. I think the majority are much more around emotional emotional decision making, but frankly, rational, it makes sense in some period or sometimes in B2B marketing, when somebody has a very specific budget or set of requirements, like a government contract, frankly, those people, you may need to lean heavier on rational. Or right now, let's say if you are, you're in one of the states that are locked down, and you want to, lock, or maybe having high COVID rates, but you're thinking to yourself, do I want to go to the restaurant or not? It's not locked down yet. You want to take the wife out to a restaurant, but you're not sure. But you're gonna be more rational. You're gonna be, I want to go to the restaurant. That's emotional, but hey, is the restaurant safe? So sometimes we got to be rational. And so in certain circumstances, there's some stock photography, actually, Steve, that will make you become more rational in your thinking. And so the first one was that brain image. Did you look up FRMI?
Yes. So we have functional magnetic
fMRI. Yes, that's why I was getting it wrong. Sorry. Yeah. Functional magnetic resolution imaging. Got it. Okay. So basically what that is the brain photos that you guys are used to seeing, but the real brain photos of seeing like kind of inside your skull. So have you ever seen those things when you're getting a CAT scan, right? That's what we're talking about. So it's funny, but those images actually trigger analytical thinking. It's been scientifically proven when people see like that image of a brain, something deep down psychologically triggers that there's science behind this, and therefore, since there's science behind this, then you will become more rational. And so that would be really important if you're trying to convey very complex information. You want somebody to be analytical in mind. And so let's say if you're competing on a technical innovation that you are superior versus your competitors, I know it sounds funny, but a small thing like an image of a brain can make somebody become more analytical thinking, and they will find the details that you put in there more important to them. If you can't really compete on emotion, you want to compete on rational kind of scientific evidence.
Wow.
Yep.
So I would argue that most marketing, and what I feel is broken about marketing, everything's done on an analytical stance, analytical first, that people are going to actually sit and focus and digest all of this and then come up to a nice logical decision.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not true.
That's not true. That's right. That's right.
But so putting a brain image, you're actually helping the emotional hand over to the rational,
Mm-hmm.
so that they do lean in and digest it a little bit better.
Just for a while. Exactly. We'll still make the emotional decision. Do I trust this ad? Do I trust this company? But that analytical thinking, if you can prime analytical thinking by activating analytical thinking processes, in this case, the brain activates that, it gets your customer to focus on the details. And if your point of differentiation or advantage is in those details, you got to make sure they do that. So that's exactly right.
Wow, that's fascinating. So where did you learn about this? Where's that?
Yeah. So there's actually a study. I read all this nonsense, right? So there's a study. I'm gonna look at. I have it right here because I thought you may ask me something like that. Yeah, it was actually a study done not too long ago in 2008 from McCabe and Castle, where basically what they did is they showed people images of brain images. And then they compared those to other images like graphs and charts and things like that. And those in the research concluded that the data lends support to the notion that part of the fascination and the credibility of brain imaging research lies in the persuasive power of the actual brain images themselves. And therefore, when showing a MRI or an fMRI image, it created associations with analytical thinking. And when that was activated, visitors developed stronger appreciation for the rational benefits that helped with conversion.
That's fascinating.
Yep. It's all in literature, guys. You just got to go to Google Scholar and look it up.
So if you have a kid and you want them to focus on the homework a little bit, you just wave around some brain images.
Mm-hmm. It actually could help them focus. I mean, same thing they hear about classical music. Have you ever heard about that? Getting your kids to wake up to classical music. There's no difference, except we can't use classical music. If we do one of these shows one day about music, we'll bring in classical music and tempo, and we'll do the exact same conversation. Those things matter. Classical music creates associations in your mind about, elevated thinking, status, and therefore you will act differently. You'll move slower. You'll be more thoughtful in your words, etc. No doubt about it.
That's crazy. That stuff. Our brains desire information in such an interesting way, and yet as humans, we're somewhat inept on understanding that and then creating content that honors that.
Yep, that's right. Because we use subjective. We think that picture looks pretty, but we're not thinking what's associated with that picture, and could it hurt your brand?
Wow.
Yep.
So tip number 2.
That's right. So we're still in the analytical thinking.
Yes.
So the rational thing. But another way, let's say you're like, Will, I sell ice cream. I'm not doing anything with a brain, right? Got it. So that'd be I don't think I'd sell ice cream analytically, by the way, or rational. I think I'd go all emotion on that. But let's say if you're a B2C consultant or a B2B consultant, right? Well, actually showing pictures and photos of business situations. Think of it as, a briefcase, a dress shoes, business suits, ties, things like that. That actually triggers a very similar response, but around competition. So these images signal competition. And when you're more competitive in nature, you tend to look for more rational reasons to validate why winning and success is important. So that's another kind of a small trick that you could use if you want people to really be detail focused and think about and think about the rational reasons, or at least confirmational reasons why they should choose you. Dropping in business photos, things that are associated with business, drives competition. Competition creates that association with you, are going to help them succeed. And therefore, they more likely look for rational reasons why they can count on you.
So the rational, when we think of the rational confirmation or thinking, that's in your book, as you refer to, the system 2 part of the brain, right?
That's right.
And so this is the follow-up confirmation that acknowledges or confirms the emotional reaction to the experience.
That's very much so. It's important.
So in the emotional side now, we want to talk about, we want to have a conversation about what photos support the emotional confirmation part.
Yep. And so, you and I have talked a lot about this. Is this, and I want everybody to know that we stand for emotional marketing, human marketing. And so this is where you should be leaning in almost always on almost any business out there, unless, there's just very few businesses, unless you're a government contractor or something like that really you need to work in the emotional space. Like I've done work with surgeons. I've done work all over the globe with people that are in very high professional jobs, and they are still making emotional decisions. So lean in. If you're going to ask somebody to make an emotional decision, think about leaning people to use more system one emotional thinking when they're looking at your pictures, your photography. And so I have a couple of tips that get you to a much better, faster emotional place. And they're actually going to seem very intuitive to most of you.
So I'm curious what they are.
That's right. So the first one is, and I've had this fight for a while, in almost all occasions, try to show people's faces in your stock imagery. So I went to a very huge company one time and battled a vice president. This company is the top 5 company in the world in terms of revenues. And they said that you should never, their perspective was never show people in your stock photography, because people can't see themselves. Like, let's say if you had somebody who was a Hispanic, well, there's a group of your population that won't identify with that nationality or ethnicity. So therefore, let's not show anybody. And I am telling you, and I told them the same thing, I categorically can tell you that is absolutely wrong from a neurological perspective. People's faces matter in almost everything you do. Why? Faces almost always in the first 1/20th of a second drive visual attention and interest. So when you first look at anything, before even consciousness happens, Steve, the human eye is looking to figure out what this thing is. And within 1/20th of a second, the eye it's through biology, will actually find faces. Because as we've been growing up, and I think yesterday you made this good point, kind of back when we were hunting and gathering and things like that in the woods, faces let me know whether or not you were in my tribe or not in my tribe. Were you a tiger or were you, a human? Faces, in almost all studies, human eye goes immediately to a face. So why would that be important? Well, I want attention on my ad. So first and foremost, it drives visual attention and interest. Because when you see images of facial expressions, it almost always drives an immediate reaction to interest as well. I may not be interested, but at least tries to figure out what is this thing, which drives this idea of interest.
And
please.
So in this time of this COVID or whatever, people are wearing these masks. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that you don't know if that's a friend or foe behind that mask, because you can't tell what their facial expression is. And then I've seen all these pictures now up on the walls where they show the people wearing a mask. Uh-huh. And it is such a mistake based on what you're sharing right now to cover up the impact that you could be earning or the connection you could be making with your images by putting masks on people. It's totally anti-human.
It is. And I get it, because why? Because you remember, it's in the first 1/20th of a second. It's before people can rationalize, why aren't they wearing a mask? You've got to make that initial emotional reaction immediately. So it's absolutely proven again and again. Even when I was running neuroscience over at PepsiCo, we knew this. What facial expressions do immediately as well is they convey the emotion, right? Just like you said, if you can't see facial muscles, I mean, you can get a little bit of emotion in the eyes. I totally get that. But if you can't see the head, you can't see the muscles here in the face, you can't really convey the emotion. And if there's no emotion in your advertising, why would I feel an emotional response to your advertising, right? There doesn't a blank look to you, if you have a mask on, or if you pick photography that has no face, means it's that much harder to create emotional engagement.
You know where that comes from? As babies, I've read these fascinating studies how babies, if I asked you, Will, I'm going to send you to another planet. You're going to be naked. You're not even going to know the language. You can't even walk. You're going to have to just lay there and figure out how to not just survive, but thrive. And that's what a baby does. It shows up totally helpless.
Yeah.
And yet, quickly, the brain connects and starts to develop relationships and connections and communications before any language happens. It's amazing. And here and as marketers, we're totally missing the boat by not acknowledging and honoring what's going on there.
That's right. We are emotional people that need human connection. You got to show faces. And the last literally is within the first 1/20th of a second, you have an initial avoidance or approach response. Remember, you have a fear, a fight or flight, right? That is all legit. And you get that from facial muscles. That's why you look, when somebody looks frowning, there's an immediate avoidance reaction. Now, avoidance isn't always bad, by the way, because depending on your brand, that may be the perfect reaction. If you are, if you're selling insurance, you want a visceral avoidance reaction so that who can help me? The insurance company. But the problem is you will have an initial reaction of either approach or avoidance. And that comes through seeing people's faces. Don't force people to read copy. Let them see the face. So first thing you got to do, tip number 1, try as best you can to have faces and people in your stock photography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just, I noticed that when I drive down the highway, the billboards I focus on has a face on it.
Yep.
And you don't realize it, but your eye naturally goes to it. Or if you're sitting in a restaurant and they have TVs going, the movement attraction. But when invariably, I find myself staring at a stupid commercial, even though it's on mute, because there's a person sitting there, but your eye just goes there without any.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah. So what's tip number 2?
Tip number 2. This is something I learned at PepsiCo in that Neuro Lab, is make your images as best possible anyways to showcase the benefits as close to the moment of use. So let me give you an example from potato chips. So there was this ad called Lay's Jenny, and it was done, I believe, in the early 1990s. And even to this day, it's by far the highest rated ad in terms of driving sales ever in the company. And so, we always kind of hypothesize on why that would happen. Well, when I was there, we actually started doing testing because we wanted to update Jenny, right? Because the ad was doing well, but it was the photos and they're really dated. It was back from the early 80s or early 90s. So we wanted to update it. And what were the things that seemed to work? And what we found through the literature, as well as the neuro testing of these images, is the closer you can get to a moment where somebody's using your product, the greater chance you have of being able to kind of create that emotional reaction you're looking for. Now, I know stock photography is not going to get you perfectly there because it's not your product, but if you place somebody in your stock photography in a similar situation, it's much easier for the brain to figure out, what am I supposed to do and how is this going to benefit me? So here's what we did. We did a study where first we showed a potato. We did neuro imaging of a potato, and it gives you a neurological response. Raw potato. Then we actually did the same test and we showed a cut potato. So now you're starting to see it being cut almost into a potato chip. Then after that, we showed a plate of potato chips on a napkin. And the neurological scores go even higher because now it's not a raw potato. It's something that's closer to what I'm used to eating. Then after that, we did neuro testing on a potato chip with plate and a sandwich. Now neurological jumps up a lot. Then when you take a potato chip and show somebody about to eat it, boom, neurological response is immediate and it's drastic. Why? Because the brain was never made to differentiate between what I see on that ad and what I feel here. So actually your digestion actually starts when you see an advertisement, somebody eating or something very close, digestion actually can start up. So the brain takes in all these images to create emotional meaning at a neurological level. So the closer you can get stock photography to be in a similar situation that you would hope your customers in, whether they're winning the deal or whatever, the better chance it has of creating that emotional engagement.
That's interesting. Your brain can't discern whether it's real or not because it generates the emotions.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's why we talk about mirroring effect and things like that, because the brain looks at those situations and the biology, you'll get endorphins, you'll get serotonins, things like that happen when the brain just looks at it. The brain doesn't really realize in those first couple of moments whether something's real or not real. It's fascinating.
Kind of like the Pavlov dog experience where they hear the bell and they start to salivate.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But it's visual, not auditory. So tip number
3, and this is the one that you'd get from my book, but match your photo to the key motivational or desire that you're trying to activate in your category. So the reality is that there are these 9 desires or 9 motivations that drive us all to act. And those desires, we've talked about them before: success, freedom, acceptance, mastery, control, captivation, admiration, love, or safety. At the end of the day, these are the 9 desires that everybody has that you want to relate your category or your brand with. So if I knew that I want to be associated with, let's just say security. Let's say you are selling alarm systems. Security is probably a good bet that that's what they desire in your category. So as it relates to finding stock photography, you should first be thinking about the word security, that desire. And don't think so much about what do I think? Do I want to show a home? Or don't think about that. Just say, what are those photographs that are going to be highly associated with that desire? In this case, maybe it's security. Look those up first, because what will happen is when somebody sees that image, it'll evoke an emotional response. It'll create that desire. And that's within the first 1/20th of a second, which again is what you want. You want that emotional connection very, very quickly before they read into your copy. So for that, you're going to look for things that are kind of inanimate in your photographs, but also kind of more people and faces and emotions, right? Because like you said, or like we're saying here, images create that desire. So if I knew that I wanted to immediately create a sense of security in a photo, I would look for things that are highly associated with security. Doesn't even matter about home security. I'm just saying with security, which would be things like armor, barricades, guards, locks, umbrellas, protect me from the rain, right? A shield, a fence, a blanket. Think about babies' blankets, right? How they provide a sense of security. Those things, even check marks, can actually provide a sense of security because a check mark is associated with job done, right? So that could even be associated with security. So when you're looking up images, if you think about security and just look for anything that relates to security, you'd write this out on a sheet of paper for your company, for your brand. Say, what are the things that I believe that are associated with security? And just write as many of these things out and try to find images with that. That is slightly more important than talking about your brand at all. It's all about creating that desire. And if you were going to look for, because I remember you're like, okay, well, you told me about human people. You said you want humans in your photographs. Absolutely. So what I want to do is I want to have photographs or find photographs. And so it makes it hard. I know it's easy for me to say this and it's hard. It means your job doubles, but also the impact of your images will double too. You would want to show people with either negative emotions or positive emotions. You can go either way on security, right? So the negative things you want to avoid, you would show people that look anxious or nervous or tense, right? Because if you see a facial expression like that, that conveys that avoidance response, like, whoa, what is that about? That would evoke security. Seeing somebody who doesn't feel secure creates a sense of I desire security in yourself. Or you can go positive. You can show somebody who looks calm, composed, has a little bit of peace of mind, a little bit of confidence. Those emotions, those facial expressions will make you feel calm, composed, kind of have some peace of mind. So if you can find people's faces, and it's not easy, like I said, but sometimes we forget that people's facial expressions are conveying the emotion. And if that emotion is being conveyed, it immediately creates that emotion in your respondent or in the person who's looking at your ad. So inanimate objects, look for things that are associated with security, safety, and in people's faces, look for avoidance of bad things or kind of approaching of these good feelings of, things like being composed, having peace of mind, et cetera.
Now that would come from, in your book, you talk about, all right, here's our motivation.
Yep.
But here's our stance. And I like to say either we got a sugar version or a salt version.
Yeah.
Right. And so you would want to make sure that your images support, if it's a cautious achievement stance, then we want to make sure that our images support the cautious in some percentage of those images, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly the way to think about it. So it's chapters 5 and 6 in the book. And so what I like about this idea of stock photography is just putting some objective criteria around it. And again, some people, when you go through, you may go, oh, it seems like extra work, but the impact can be so powerful if you have that kind of structure. So yeah, a great example of your next one, right? Achievement. So if you want to be associated with achievement, if you're Nike or you're selling services that can take somebody's business to the next level, and achievement may be a very strong desire of your customer. So in that case, think on a sheet of paper, write out those things that are associated with achievement. Hopefully it relates to your category, but achievement would be things like trophies, crowns, ribbons, fist pumps. When you ever see stock photography, people pumping their fist, or people with their holding with a V or something like that, holding their arms up in a V formation. Those things are highly associated with success, right? And that's what achievement's about, this desire for success. So you want to find objects somewhere where it conveys these moments of success. And trophies are highly associated with success, winning, things like that. And on the facial expressions, if you want to drive successful feelings, the facial expressions you're looking for on the negative side would be showing somebody who's complacent, a bit unmotivated, maybe lethargic, right? So, the opposite of winning is not losing. The opposite of winning, really, from an emotional perspective, is being kind of lethargic and you have no drive.
Right.
Showing somebody, sounds funny, but just showing somebody with very little kind of emotion, or showing them that they're complacent or kind of not focused, would actually create a sense of, well, I don't want to be like that. I want to be a success. Or you show the positive feelings of success, which are exactly what you say: tenaciousness, determination, confidence, victorious. Images of success are smiles. Usually when people are successful, they're like, yeah, but they're not joyous smiles like I'm in love with you smile. It's more of like a confident smile, like I did it. Yes, that kind of moment. So finding those moments in your stock photography will immediately evoke that sense of achievement. That a sense of achievement and success hopefully will halo to your brand.
So like a teenager that's on a family vacation and doesn't want to, so get some pictures of that pouting teenager to represent the opposite of success. And
it's so funny you said that. There was a bank, or what was that? There's a TV commercial a couple of years ago. It had the girl was in the car and they're taking this family road trip, and she's all sad the whole time. She doesn't want to be there. She's always on her phone. The parents are just struggling to get her to look. And then they finally go to the beach and she throws down the phone and she runs to the beach, right? And it was a car ad. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what that was really about? That was really about showing parents being successful in creating a family moment. That's what that car ad was about. And that finally that car allowed them, the parents, to feel like they were successful in getting their kid to not look at that damn cell phone. That's what that was about. I love that.
All right. So empowerment.
Last one. There's a lot of these examples, but empowerment, remember, is our desire for greater control, particularly over things that are in our environment, things that we naturally don't have control over. So what you would do again is, okay, let's say if you know that your customers desire greater control over their business or greater control over sales or whatever, what you want to do is look for objects that are associated with control. And this is funny, but things like things that I see that are highly associated with control are things with dials, remote controls, lists. When you see lists of things, that feels like there's a semblance of control, especially if those lists are numbered. Doing things like breaking through walls, breaking of chains, and people associate being under somebody's control by being restricted. So chains being broken, walls coming down, people overcoming barriers, things like that are associated with having greater control. Dials on a thermostat, options on a website, things like that. Having the ability to give people different options. So for visual images, if you can associate yourself with anything where people can take control over their environment around them, that would be an important association to have. And in the faces, if you want to communicate from a nonverbal kind of from the facial emotional expressions of somebody, you would look for, on the negative side, somebody who looks a bit overwhelmed, a bit like in control, a little bit fearful. Because when people don't have control, they kind of fret, right? So there's a little bit of anxiety in their expressions. But somebody who does have control, they look confident, they look strong. They may be multitasking in some way. They're going to feel, it's going to look like they're in a controlled, kind of confident look and expression. So those are types of facial expressions you're going to want to look for. Again, not always the easiest thing on stock photography, but trying to give you some objective kind of science-based rationale and selecting them. Once you get down to a manageable number, they can make or break your success.
So I love this conversation. I've always thought about it, but I've never been in a position of confidence to approach what stock images would be a perfect complement to the text or the intent of the asset that we're creating. And so to know that we have associations with everything and they generate feelings, and that small, seemingly insignificant choices in stock photos can help or hurt your conversion rates being the emotions that are evoked from consuming, seeing, being exposed to those images in your assets that you're creating, be they digital or a physical.
That's right.
People's faces are extremely important, and it's just the way that we're designed from birth. It's how we communicated and became acclimated to the world as a baby. We judged what the situation was based on facial expressions, whether we're safe, whether we're in danger. Images create desires as well. So by making sure that your text is complemented with images that create the exact desire, that desire being from whatever that state of mind that people are in when they're experiencing your brand, it would be smart to make sure that it complements that, what the motivation and the stance that they're in. Will, what's one last little thought that you want to leave us with today?
Yep, it's always going to be, let's think about marketing through the human eyes, the human condition, designed for human beings, and you're going to be in a much better place.
Yeah, the biggest quote here that I really like that you've given as being human is an actual competitive advantage. And that means creating stuff for the humans on the other side. We're not consumers, we're humans. Well, this has been another excellent episode on
it was fun.
The Mindstate Marketing Hour. Will, so you got a workshop coming up, correct?
We do. We just actually finished that workshop yesterday, but every month we do more workshops. And starting in January, we're going to have a totally different format that you can engage with us. So currently you can buy a book bundle. We call it the starter package. And the starter package allows you to buy a copy of the book, a workbook, and a charter. So you can do the activities in my book, and you'll actually get an autographed copy of my book and to be sent to your house. So we have those right now. And starting in January, it looks like we're going to have a master course where you can actually do a series of videos on your own in your time to identify your own understanding, or to create a greater understanding around the book, but also identify mind states for your company. And then, of course, we're always going to have these workshops where you can come in with your data, and we'll work together to identify the correct mind state that you should be marketing to, and also even doing these audits on your creative, which has been fun. That's what we started off yesterday, doing audits on creative. So if you go to mindstategroup.com, you will start seeing more and more of those offers in the very near future. But you can get a package right now. Starter package is ready to go.
Well, excellent. Well, this is an excellent episode, really worth my time. And I'm Steve Brown with ROI Online, and we've been spending time with author Will Leach from the Mindstate Group. His book, Marketing the Mind States, go get it and be enlightened and become a better marketer and connect with the humans that you want to support. And thanks for being on another episode there, Will.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. And that's a wrap.